Hi, my name is Leah Patterson. I'm a creative writer, visual artist, and community organizer. This is an exploration of how my family, culture, and education have shaped my relationship with literacy. My definition of culture is both familial and geographic. I grew up in a household dealing with generational poverty in a small conservative town in New Jersey. Small towns are heavy with lore and gossip, and I was exposed to this sort of storytelling from the very beginning of my life, learning the word-of-mouth history of my teachers, neighbors, and the places we frequented. I loved stories and spent most of my younger years, especially below middle school, creating rich worlds with friends on the playground, redesigning Bloody Mary mythos, so much so that signs outlawing the Bloody Mary game were taped to every elementary school bathroom door, and begging older kids in the neighborhood to recount as many details as possible from the movies about Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Jason Voorhees. I loved to be scared. I loved that media held power. My mother listened to Rob Zombie music in the car every morning on the drive to first grade. Because I grew up in a family that has been experiencing generational poverty as far back as I've been able to trace it, my parents themselves worked a lot of jobs when I was growing up. Sometimes they were the owners, sometimes they weren't. But regardless, I spent most of the summers of my childhood being set up with movies and television and video games and books at their places of work, as they couldn't afford babysitters or childcare. I passed a lot of my time transporting myself into other people's worlds and later designing my own. I quickly developed an understanding of the who, what, and where of a story, and the importance of beginnings, middles, and ends. After all, that was what made a good Disney Channel original movie. Many of my parents' jobs were also visually focused. They owned an airbrush shop, they worked in a t-shirt printing warehouse, and they owned a business where they designed, printed, and installed signage. I was surrounded by story and words and titles. Words weren't necessary, though, to create recognition or to inspire imagination. One of my parents' favorite stories about me when I was little was that I woke up at 11 o'clock at night at the age of 3 and asked my parents if I could paint, and they let me. My parents, however, had extremely different relationships with reading and writing. My father struggled with schooling his entire life, and as far as I know, hasn't read a book in his adult life. Both of my parents only have a high school education. My mother, however, grew up with a mother and grandparents who read ferociously. My maternal great-grandmother still reads 7 books a week, even into her 90s, even as she's forgotten my birthday. As such, I experienced different modes of storytelling depending on which side of the family I spent time with. On my father's side, with whom we spent most of our holidays, and I spent the most time with cousins, stories were a vehicle for bonding. Memories and family folklore were retold over and over again, year after year, changing and shaping as the younger members of the family asked questions, or depending on who was telling the story. I loved this. It made me wonder. As per my mother's instruction, we had so many books in our house, almost all secondhand or donated by local churches. My father often built huge custom bookshelves when we moved, which we did a lot. He painted murals around these bookshelves to show us that this was an important part of our lives. I filled entire composition books with stories written in blue pen, mostly inspired or copied from the books that I was taking home from the library. My kindergarten year, I recall a lot of repetitive writing practice. An assignment where we needed to draw all 50 stars on a drawing of the American flag and that my wrist hurt at the end of it. My years busing back and forth in elementary school consisted mostly of long, overarching love plots playing out between my favorite toy and my best friends. On the playground every day for 3 years, we were witches, convinced that we all held power over the elements. Middle school was difficult for me. I was placed in an honors English class where I often felt like the least capable student in the classroom. I spent a lot of time online creating characters and stories in the Neopets role-playing message boards. I took part in community theater where I memorized lines but preferred my time in the dressing room, listening to the older kids telling stories about their relationships and their lives. I pored over copies and copies of Cosmo Girl, stuck on the salacious true stories featured on the covers. In high school, I continued on the honors track. I continued to avoid reading classroom content, but began writing personal poetry and sharing this writing with my friends on the internet. In my sophomore year, I came out as queer and spent the next 9 months trying to figure out a way to escape the onslaught of bullying. I applied to a boarding school for the arts with my creative writing portfolio without letting my parents know, and I was awarded a full scholarship. I moved to Michigan. My life became a story. I spent 8 hours a day focused on the craft of writing, and the rest creating my own biographical stories online, photographing my friends, and curating a world for my internet friends to see. Every night, 3 of my friends and I would sneak into one dorm room and listen to the same tape to fall asleep. We were teenagers away from home who were learning to create art, and also ourselves, and we all applied our understanding of story to this. The adults on campus were there specifically to support us, to teach us how to apply our own creative thinking and problem solving to create new, exciting things. We often worked with multimedia, collaborating with the visual arts students, which I think is probably where my love of the visual arts really came through. In my first few years of school, my English teachers engaged me in ways that allowed me to connect sociological concepts to different genres of horror monsters. Now, my visual arts professors push me to utilize these thought processes in more physical mediums. I'm absolutely a visual artist because of the trajectory and the support I had surrounding my skills in literacy. For me, having a sense and understanding of literacy has always been a way to create something new, but it has also been a way to place meaning on and to archive moments of my life.
I ride it everywhere. Oh, how I count the ways we dance our lives within me. I love my roller skates. I ride them everywhere. Circle flows eternally. How can I find a savior? Got the coolest BMX. I ride it everywhere. 'Cause noble learn to die for truth is holy to repent one sin. My daddy has a Subaru. I ride it everywhere. God travels like a wave. My mind it travels like a wave. I ride everywhere.